Engine spins, clutch spins, gearbox spins, rear wheel turns. How does all that work? Catch you inside.
RevelatorAlf.
Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. Hope you're enjoying the channel and the series. Please like, share, subscribe, leave loads of comments below, and check out the website RevelatorAlf.com, and especially go check out the Harley page with all Softail and sport glide information. So in this video I'm talking about gear ratios, the transmission, how that works, and what that means for you and what your kind of understanding of it can be. Right, so first of all, the gearbox is the only thing that you can manipulate on your bike once you're riding it. Of course, we know that. You just change gears, right? And you can go faster. The relationship between the engine and the input to the transmission via the clutch, you know, that primary drive there, okay, well, that is a constant apart from the RPM, but the relationship, the ratio between the output sprocket, if you like, out the crankshaft pulley from the engine, and to the transmission pulley, if you like, via the clutch, that is a constant, and it's actually a relationship of 36 to 46. What that actually means, there's a relationship of a 1.278 ratio. So for every 1,000 RPM of the engine, the transmission input is rotating at 782.47 RPM. All very sobering stuff, I know. So that never changes, or that ratio never changes. So you can increase your RPM to 2,000 and you just double that, you know, 782.47. You go 3,000, you triple it. 4,000, you quadruple it. You know, 5,000 RPM, then you basically multiply it by 5 times, you know, all that sort of stuff. But the ratio stays the same. Also, what you got to understand is that the ratio coming out of the gearbox, from the gearbox, the output drive pulley, if you like, or sprocket, and to the actually pulley on the rear wheel, or the sprocket on the rear wheel, depending on what bike you've got, of course, that stays the same. You don't readily change those whilst you're riding along. So, you know, if you have a bigger rear sprocket or a bigger rear pulley, that means that for a constant size drive pulley out the transmission, you're actually going to go slower. If you reduce the size of the rear pulley or sprocket, you're actually going to go faster. If you increase the size of the transmission output sprocket, okay, you'll actually make the rear wheel go faster, and if you reduce it, you'll make it go slower. Now, what happens in racing terms, or let's say if you're doing stunt riding, that kind of thing, you will manipulate those two to get the optimum performance, what you want from your bike. If you start changing those you're really going to affect the horsepower potential delivery to the rear tire, and also the torque delivery to the rear tire as well. But that's for another video, but there is information on the Harley page for that very thing. But right now we're talking about the gearbox. So the gearbox is the only thing that we can manipulate. Now this video is actually inspired by another video I made when I actually took the bike and I tested its maximum speed as a stock bike, and it's still been limited. I got to 110 miles an hour. I took the panniers off and actually got to 116 miles an hour, which kind of defied the logic there a little bit. Some of the comments were coming in saying about the gearbox, and saying actually the 5th gear is the top gear, that's the fastest gear which you should be riding in, not going 6th gear. And another comment saying actually the 6th gear is an overdrive gear. Unfortunately, that's wrong. That's not the case at all. I can see what they're trying to say, that the higher the gear you go, especially in the 6th gear, it tends to bring down the RPM a little bit, so that's when you kind of cruise around on the highway speeds for that. But actually no, there's no overdrive on this gearbox. This is actually 6 gears, and it actually keeps on going up in percentages. Now this is all on the website here, so just go check that out, and I apologize for the wind if you're picking it up. But here I just want to say here, right, so the ratio from the first gear it's a 9.311. The second gear is 6.454. Third gear is 4.793. Fourth gear 3.882. Fifth gear 3.307, and sixth gear 2.79. I tried to memorize those, but I couldn't really. Okay, basically what that means is, for let's say 1,000 RPM, input to the transmission is 782.47 RPM, okay? That means in first gear, your output RPM is going to be 84.037 RPM. Second gear, it's going to be 121.238. Third gear, 163.25. Fourth, 201.56. Fifth gear is 236.61. Sixth gear is 280.45. So you can see that actually the RPM obviously is being reduced from the engine to the input to the transmission, and then the gears going up will actually obviously considerably reduced RPM, but it's actually increasing. Those figures aren't necessarily important to you, but what is important to you is the percentage gain that you get, or the percentage increase in RPM that you get from changing gears. Okay, so from changing from first gear to second gear, you actually get a 44.267 percentage gain in RPM. From second to third gear, you get a 34.65, and then from fourth gear all the way to sixth gear, that's when it starts coming down, your percentage gain. You get 23.46 between third and fourth. Fourth and fifth, it's 17.38, and then between fifth and sixth, you get 18.5. So when you say that the highest gear is fifth gear, it isn't. Actually, the highest gear is sixth, and you still get an 18.5% increase in rotational speed to the output drive sprocket, if you want to call it that, and to the rear wheel and to the tyre. Now, the torque of the engine is really there to design to get the bike moving and to get it accelerating. So that's why you want to feel the torque in lower speed grunt, if you like. The horsepower is there to keep the bike moving whilst it's in motion to achieve those higher speeds. So that's the difference between torque and horsepower. And there's another video about that coming soon explaining it. But that's why when you go for a stage 2 upgrade, you can either go for a torque cam or a power cam, which depends which kind of riding you want to do. If you want to achieve better, higher speeds, or you want to have more grunt in the lower range, you know, that kind of thing, lower speeds for overtaking, for, you know, pulling away from the lights, all that kind of stuff. So it really depends, you know, there's no right or wrong, it depends what your style of riding is. So the highest gear and the fastest gear is definitely sixth gear, because you've got an 18.5% increase in the output there. Now, as I say, the relationship from the output of the gearbox, the output shaft of the gearbox to the rear pulley is exactly the same. You can manipulate that, but then that will affect torque, and it's always a bit of a trade-off really between, you know, the speed that you'll get and the torque and the horsepower that's being able to be pushed to the rear tyre as well. But that's it, that's what the gear ratios are. That's what you're effectively doing. You're changing one gear to the next to the next. Now, the question is, why do you have a gearbox in the first place? Well, the reason is you can't have all the power going to the rear tyre, because there isn't enough power to actually get it rolling. Okay, so you need to get it rolling effectively, let's say. You could, but you know, you'd probably be able to stuck with one gear. Okay, so that's for, let's say, if you were wanting to attempt a high speed record and you've only got a stock bike or a stock gearbox, let's say, and let's say you wanted to manipulate it by putting a really small sprocket on the rear tyre. That means you could have almost like a 1-to-1 ratio with the rear sprocket, with the rear tyre, and it will go really fast. The problem is you haven't got enough power, enough torque to be able to get the bike rolling. but you have got enough torque and horsepower to keep the bike rolling whilst it's in motion. You see, that's where the difference. So that's why for the first part, to get the bike launched, you would have another vehicle tow it. You tow it until you achieve a certain speed, then you'd have enough engine power to keep it rolling, and that's why you disconnect the tow and then you'd carry on. So that's how they used to do it in old land speed records as well. Tow the vehicle first and then you just take over. So it's all about manipulating that gearing. But for a stock bike, that's all we do, and we're just changing that gearing so you can launch, use the engine power to get the bike launching, and then you can incrementally change the gears to speed up the output shaft, and whatever torque is available and horsepower is available will keep the bike moving and accelerating forward. And that's what you want to do. Bearing in mind, a body in motion or a vehicle in motion requires less force to keep it moving and to keep it accelerating. It's that initial push, that's the hardest one. So that's why you got the biggest percentage gain between second and third gear. Thereafter, you've got the least percentage gain between third, fourth, fifth, and obviously sixth, or fourth, fifth, and sixth, I should say. Anyway, I hope this kind of helps you out a little bit in deciding, you know, maybe if you want to change things in the future, or change for, you know, what about the power, what does that really affect, and all that kind of stuff. Really, all you're doing is changing the amount of power into the gearbox. Okay, so unless you change your gearbox or change the gears within your gearbox, that's never going to change. And unless you change the output sprocket and the rear pulley, wheel pulley, nothing's going to change there. All you're changing is the amount of power to the gearbox, and out obviously to the rear wheel at the end of the day. Anyway, so sorry if it's a little bit windy. Hope this helps a little bit. So this really was influenced or inspired, this video, by a couple of comments, which is good. You know, I appreciate these comments. We're saying, you know, that the fifth gear is a top gear. It isn't. Actually, you might have to work the RPM a little bit more with the sixth gear, but the sixth gear is the top gear. That's where you're going to get your highest speed. Now, if you're talking about shorter distances, yes, so probably fourth and fifth gear is going to be your best gear to achieve the maximum speed in a shorter distance. That's different. But if you've got the distance, okay, if you've got the space available to be able to use that sixth gear, that is your top gear, and that's which is going to give you that 18.5% increase in speed over your fifth gear for a given RPM, of course. Right, well, hope you found that useful at least. Please like, share, subscribe, leave loads of comments below. Check out the website RevelatorAlf.com. Check out that Harley Parley page with all the information which I give you. It's much more detailed there as well, so you'll be able to digest it in slow time as well. Right, well, I'll catch you on the next video whenever that is. Ta-da now.
RevelatorAlf.